Nehemiah what was Nehemiah's job, his profession?
Cupbearer.
Cupbearer, all right. Raise your hands. All right, and cupbearer. And let's see, he knew how to do two things that really helped him get through his, and get into God's will, and there are two things that go together. Yes?
Praying.
Praying's one of them, and something goes along with praying. Yes? Fasting. You know how to fast and pray. And so he was in pretty good shape. And he had the hand of God on him. He was put in a place for a reason. He was the king's cupbearer. And we ask you to look this week for why you were put where you were put. And to find why God has you in the place you might say, why am I here? Find that. And we are put there for a reason. And God puts us there. And so Nehemiah returns. He comes back to Israel and to Jerusalem specifically with a broken heart to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and rebuild the gates to put a defense around Jerusalem. It's been destroyed. The temple is now built, but the walls are not built. And so that's where we'll get back into this lesson here. Let's go ahead and pray. Let's ask the Lord to help us today. And Father, we are grateful for another chance to preach your word. Thank you for the people who've come today. Thank you for your word. It's amazing. Thank you for the rest we have. There is a rest for the people of God. And we thank you for that, Lord. And I pray we would understand that this in quietness and rest in your presence. And we would gather knowledge and wisdom to serve you better, to win these battles that we will face. And use this in a mighty way, Father. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so I'm going to read chapter 2 and verses 9 through 12. It says, Then I came to the governors beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me. Then Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Amorite, heard of it and agreed them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days, and I arose in the night, I and some few men that were with me. Neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem, neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. So, here we find Nehemiah coming back. He's come back to Jerusalem, and remember the first return, 50,000 people. Second return, several thousand, and now we have very few coming back with Nehemiah. It says some few men are with me. He had the king's guards. He had some guards with him. Some guards that the king had sent, but they weren't Jewish people. They were just people to protect him along the way with the money he had, and which Ezra, of course, didn't have. And but Nehemiah had that. And just a few men with him. He came in quietly into town, and he was just there 3 days and looking around. And the first thing I want to say is he looked at the need. He looked at the need. If you notice, it says verse 11, I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. And I arose in the night, and I and some few men with me. Neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went up by night by the gate of the wall of the valley, even before the dragon well and to the dung port, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which are broken down, and the gates thereof were consumed with fire. Notice, first of all, he came to town quietly. He knew that God had put in his heart to do this. And that's one of the things is he didn't tell anybody at first. And it's always biblical. It's always the pattern is God gives a man a vision. That's always the pattern. That's what God told Moses before Israel knew they were going to be delivered. It's just always the Bible pattern. Jesus came. Nobody knew he was going to come down the cross. And then God puts people to follow the vision of the man of God. That's the Bible pattern you always have. It's not really an exception to it, really. And that's the way the things work. And so he had God put in his heart. And the good thing was, it wasn't just something he thought of. I would like to be the guy known. I want my name on the wall that I rebuilt the walls. It wasn't about him. God put in his heart a burden for the walls. His heart was broken. He wept and he did that. And then it said he went and he viewed the walls in verse 13. and viewed the walls of Jerusalem. Verse 15. Then I went up by the night to the brook and viewed the wall. Notice, he's doing this at night. He's doing this quietly. Why? Because him and God are kind of getting this deal going, and he's getting the burden, and he's seeing what God wants him to see, and he's seeing the need, and he needs to see the situation and see the burden, and and to get that in his heart. And so he viewed it twice. He took a look at what was broken down. He saw what was wrong. And verse 17, then I said unto them, ye see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lieth waste, and the gates are burned with fire. So now he's sharing and having other people look. And so having the vision, having the view, having the looking at the need. Now, with the advent of a few things in our mental facilities and our mental way of thinking, the way America does things, is we kind of have gotten to this thing where we don't want to be sad. Part of the deal is because people can't control their minds anymore. Okay, they can't stop depression. Instead of getting depressed, they go into depression, which is two different things. Everybody gets depressed, but because we don't have the facility to pull our minds to as the Bible says, pull it in the loins of your mind and control your thinking. What happens is people see something sad, they avoid it because they don't want to get depressed. They don't want to see bad news. They don't want to hear bad news. They don't want to see something wrong. And so they kind of say, oh, this is sad, and I don't want to think about this. I don't want to see this. And so they're not able to get much of a burden. Why? Because when they start going down, because we can't control our minds and we don't know how to control our thinking, we can't get a broken heart without having a ruined life. We can't get a broken heart without spiraling, because we can't look and be sad and say it's terrible. Let me pray about this. Let me help this person. Okay, now I'm going to be with my family. I'm going to be okay. Now I'm going to choose to be joyful and happy again. But that's normal humanity. Okay, is being able to see bad news, know something's bad, and not just. But because we are, we're so weak. If we walk out in the wind, which way the wind blows us, we tumble that way. That's where we are mentally. And so, and because society told you're supposed to always be happy, people think something's wrong with them if they have a burden. Being a burden is almost necessary to be a good Christian. If your heart isn't broken for somebody or something, you're not living for something bigger than you and your own happiness, you're not going to be a good Christian. And so Nehemiah went out and viewed it. This is very biblical. Let me take you to the book of, let's go to the book of John and chapter 4. I just want to show you this thing of view, look and see it. And a heart for something, to have a burden for something. In verse 35, say not ye, there yet 4 months, and then cometh harvest? Behold, I say unto you, lift up your eyes, and look on the fields, for they are white already under the harvest. Notice he says there, lift up your eyes. Lift them up. I want you to see the harvest needs done, needs taken care of. Lift up your eyes. That's what Jesus commands them to do. And then go back to Matthew and watch how Jesus did this himself. Matthew chapter 9 is seeing the need. Matthew chapter 9 and verse 36 and 37. But when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion on them, because they fainted and were scattered abroad as sheep having no shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest truly is plenteous, but the laborers are few. So, Jesus, it said, when he saw the multitudes. Now, Jesus is the Son of God, and he's perfect, but yet his heart was moved to compassion when he saw the multitudes as sheep having no shepherd. So he tells, hey, you guys need to lift up your eyes and look at the needs. And here's the thing that most people think, and it's backward, and it makes sense logically, but it's not biblical, but it's what our mind's going to think. Well, I got my own problems to deal with. And we do, don't we? How many of you have your quota just fine and full of problems and things you say, I don't need to take any more problems. Here's the thing. The burden bearers get grace from God, and their burdens become lighter. You want to find someone who can't handle their problems? Find someone who just sits there and gets consumed with their own problems. I mean, every time you talk to them, how's it going? Terrible. You wouldn't believe my family and this and that. And they just start moaning and groaning. And you try to say, I've had some problems too. Oh, but my problems. And those people, I want to tell you, their burdens are heavy. I promise you their burdens are heavier to them than my burdens are to me. Because when you're a burden bearer and you take other people's problems, and the Bible commands you to bear you one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ, God says, hey, I know you're a human. You can't handle that much. Let me make your burdens lighter. Let me carry them with you. Let me help you with that. Because you have a lot in your heart, and you have that. And God gives you a grace and a peace and a lifting of your load. Or you can get overwhelmed with your own burdens, which is what most people do. They're almost like they're standing on the edge of a cliff with their burdens and leaning backwards, and you touch with a feather, they're gone, because they can't. All they have is their burdens in their life, my problems, and me, and I have this. And by the way, two things that happens when you get your mind on other people. One is God gives you grace, but two, you realize your problems weren't as bad as you thought. If you think your family's messed up, let me tell you, I can send you some people make you feel pretty good about your family. and you'll find out, you just forget. When you get consumed with your own problems, you know what you forget? A person who grew up in a rough family and a rough life, their life's 10 times better now, but they start being consumed and think about their own burdens. You'd be surprised, even those people will forget how bad it was before and think their life's atrocious now. Because why? Because all they're thinking about. As they say, if you get wrapped up in yourself, you become a very small package. And as you consume, and so he said, hey, I'm going to go look at these walls. Why? Because you're going to work better with the walls, Nehemiah, in your mind, in your heart. When you see the need. See, what's going to happen is when you decide to change something or help or do something, if you don't have a burden to keep you going and it motivates you, the first opposition is going to stop you. If you don't have the vision of what could be and what needs to be done, you never you never really keep on going. If you don't have any kind of broken heart, you don't realize the importance of you serving God. A Christian who's very self-centered generally doesn't become a good Christian. One of the reasons is because there's no reason for them to stay strong. A Christian who's bearing other people's burdens knows they have to be strong because somebody needs them to be strong. Have you seen this generation of grandparents who shouldn't be parents anymore? And you wouldn't think they had the strength, and 5 years ago they didn't get the strength, but all of a sudden the grandparents are your mom and dad now. And all of a sudden, because they care about the grandkids, they do it. And do it well. Why? They see the need. And the burden for their grandkids makes them strong. It makes us they have that. And so that's what happens when you lift up your eyes and see the need. You know what? You get the heart of God. And you start loving people, and you start caring, and you start wanting to do something. He said, let me walk around and look at these walls. Man, they're just destroyed. Rubble. He said they broke them down so small that they were the rocks. They built a wall of Nehemiah out of small rocks because everything was so destroyed, and all the big rocks have been taken in to build the walls, and now the walls are destroyed. And when they found Nehemiah's walls, they found it made of all kinds of little rocks, as well as medium-sized rocks they brought in from farther out. But it was so everybody could build part of the wall. It was destroyed. And he looked around and he looked and got the burden and said, "This is terrible. Look at this. The gates. There's no gates for Jerusalem. And look at the Psalms and all the things in the Bible about the gates and all the songs and man, this is terrible. We've got to get this fixed." His heart got moved. When somebody comes to this area to start a church, the pastors usually send a guy by me. And what I do with the guy? I drive him around. I'll just show him, look, there's no church around here. And let me show you, it's a pretty rough area. And these people here have no gospel witness. Look over here. The only religion you'll see is there's a Buddhist center, and there's a New Age center, and there's a cult over here. And let him see the need. Let him see the need. Look, when I go to a country, I don't stay at the church. I want to see the country. I want to see the need. I want to see the people. And you get moved when you see the need. It breaks your heart. And it makes you see why we need to reach this country, why we need to do this thing. We bring new pictures back. Why? You see it. And you see the need. And so that's a biblical thing. And to see the need, and you have those things. He's just getting himself ready, getting himself familiar, and getting his heart right, and seeing what he'll need to do. And so he looked at the need, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. I'm not saying you sit around and drive around to the drug addicts and sit there and stare at them for 8 hours a day and do that 7 days a week. I'm not talking about that. God will give you somebody to help, or just drive through your neighborhood, and instead of just looking at the kids and saying, bunch of punks, you look at the kids and say, man, I wonder what the family's like. That kid would be out there this time of night acting that way. I wonder what that kid could do for God if he got saved. You start seeing the need and seeing and getting the heart of God for people, and having compassion, get a vision for people, and you drive down the road and you see the woman, the woman who's a woman of the night, and you wonder what happened to make a girl do that. What kind of upbringing she had? Who abused her? That's usually the case. Poor girl's addicted to something probably. Boy, but she could probably has a great life if she could get off of that. Maybe you might even stop and if you're a lady or a couple, preach the gospel to her. Invite her to church. We've had them in here before, and try to win her to Christ, because Jesus came to seek and to save that which is lost, and get in the heart of God and try to do that. And so, first of all, I looked at the need. Number two, breaking the bad status quo always brings opposition. Let's go back to Nehemiah. And breaking the bad status quo always brings opposition. I don't understand this. It's a weird thing.
Yep.
Guy comes into a dead church and he tries to revive it, he's going to get opposition. You think everybody's saying, no, we're kind of dead. We'd like to do something for God. You might have a group of them, but you're going to have Sanballat and Tobiah. You're going to have people who oppose you. Whenever you try to do something great, you will find people there to say, no, that can't be done. That's a bad idea. That's not going to happen. And naysayers. We've had people in our church, they get saved, and their family, every direction is a wreck. Their friends are addicts and in and out of jail. I've seen parents. I never understand that. I've seen parents, 4 kids, 3 of them are in jail. And addicts, and just a mess. And the 4th one comes to church and starts getting a life turnaround. The 3rd one gets back out of jail, hangs around their friends, and is bringing their drugged out friends into the house. No big deal. Mom didn't say a thing. But the one going to church, what are you doing? That religious stuff is no good. and will attack and fight against the person that's getting out of the status quo of their family. And I'm going, what are you thinking? Why? Because people who are a mess like things around them to stay a mess. Because if anything comes out of the mess or anything does something greater, they feel like they look bad. You start doing something great for God, you'll be surprised how the churches will start to criticize you. Why? Well, yeah, maybe they're doing something, but it's probably all fake. It's probably just for, bad motivation. Why? Because they're not doing anything for God. It makes them feel a lot better if there's something wrong with you who want to do something for God. Because dead Christians don't like alive Christians. Because they feel convicted. And so the status quo, you get opposition. And you look at here in chapter 10, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, they grieved them exceedingly that there was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. Okay? And we're going to see these 2 guys and other ones, Arabian and Sanballat and Tobiah, all throughout the book of Nehemiah fighting it. What do you mean you're coming here to rebuild the walls? It grieved them exceedingly. They didn't want it. These were foreigners. These are people who came in, and they weren't the Jewish people. They were people who came in there, and they were if you know your history of America, they're the carpetbaggers who came in there to make money. They came in there to oppress the people. They came in there to look at these people, Jews, and you know what? Hey, we're gonna take the best house here. We're gonna keep this land straight from you guys getting back up and fighting against Persia. And they were just oppressors. And they fought them the whole time. And they did that. And so breaking a bad status quo always brings opposition. If you want to really change and see great things, you will have some good supportive people, hopefully, but you're going to have enemies. If you want to do great things, you're going to have enemies. You want to make a great work for God, you're just going to have opposition. It's just going to happen. And you're going to have people who say, I do not want that thing to happen, no matter how good it seems like it is. That's always going to be there. Next, it was God dependent. He's so clear on this. Nehemiah is in chapter 2 and verse 8. At the end of the verse says, "And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon me." He said, "It is according to the good hand of my God." Notice the personalness of that. Verse 18, "Then I told them of the hand of God which is good upon me." He says, look, God's hand is on me. That's the only reason we're even trying this thing. And verse 20, "Then answered I them and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us." The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Chapter 4 and verse 20. "In what place thereof ye hear the sound of the trumpet, thither shall resort ye thither unto us. Our God shall fight for us." Look, Nehemiah, all over the book, he just says, God is with us. God's going to help us. God, because it was God dependent. Wouldn't it be nice if you stepped out in such a way where you have to have God? And said, I'm going to do this big thing where I'm going to need God. Wouldn't it be great? Look, need God. Needing God's a great thing. It's a great situation to be in. And realize anything done that matters is God dependent. Works of man, I mean, you can do physical things and things that God just given the man the ability to do, and with little money and a few materials and resources. But look, there's things where you need God. And a lot of times people just say, well, I'm not going to do that because it can't happen. That's you want to stay in the flesh and where you don't need God. But understand, God-dependent things are great. But you're going to be over your head. But it was dependent on God. He says, Lord, you got to do this thing. And throughout the book, he prays over and over, Lord, bring this thing to pass. And Lord, let this thing happen. This thing was dependent upon God. He was relying on God. Though he was a gifted man and a great leader, he still knew he needed God. And though he had gifts and talents, he depended upon the Lord, and he really looked to God throughout the whole book and depended upon God. Can I tell you, look, so many churches and so many methods nowadays are all man-dependent, and they use the works of the flesh and the talents of the flesh. Let's do something big where we need God.
Amen.
And you know what? The church, we're going to need God to do great things. I mean, we've got a building, we've got, whatever, but, those things aren't going to change a life and save a soul and bring revival and change a nation and reach a world. It's going to take God. And it's God dependent. And that's what it was. And that's what the whole thing is. He starts building the walls. Next thing is he handled the battle properly. This is my favorite part. I love this part because he handled the battle properly. I see this so often and just working with so many pastors and in the ministry and just people with their own lives and stuff. Most people do the worst thing they can do in a battle. Okay? In the battles of God, there's you got to be God dependent, but there's one thing you have to do with your life that most people make the mistake of. And the first thing he did is he handled the battle properly. You look at chapter 2 and verse 10 and 11. This is so funny. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the servant, the Ammonite, heard of it, it grieved them exceedingly. There was come a man to seek the welfare of the children of Israel. Now, watch carefully. Here's these people who are going to be his enemies for the rest of the time. And they're upset. And he's there. See if you can find what Nehemiah does. Ready? Verse 11. "So I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. And I rose in the night, and I and some few men that were with me, neither told I any man what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Neither was there any beast with me, save the beast that I rode upon. And I went out by night, the gates of the valley, and even before the dragon well, and to the dung port, and view the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down." Okay? So I've already read what he did here. Anybody catch what Nehemiah did about them? Anybody? You know why you don't know the answer? He did absolutely nothing about them. You know what he did? He walked into town. He starts going through town, and he finds these guys who don't like him. All right. Anyway, I'm going to go work on these walls. That's what he did. Absolutely nothing. You know what most people do? They've got to come in here, and they got to go build those walls, and then they say, you don't like me? Do you know what? He doesn't like me. Why don't you like me? I don't like you either. Are the walls going to get built that way? He's like, oh, you don't like me? Hey. All right, where's those walls? Let's start building some things here. He did absolutely nothing about it. You know that's exactly what you do? You know the worst thing you do is you stop and deal with them. There comes a time, sometimes, we get a little later, when you have to deal with some things, but you know, initially and generally, you don't consume yourself with them, but your flesh naturally starts dwelling on them. I can't believe that. I can't believe they said that about me. They are so wrong. I got to tell some people that they're wrong. Man, I got to clear my name. I got to tell everybody about them. I'm going to go talk to them. I'm going to tell them what they did. I'm going to, and then you think about it all day long. You dwell on it, and then you go on Facebook and to my friends who don't like me, and then whatever you do, and you just dwell on this stuff, and you dwell. Meanwhile, whatever you're supposed to be doing didn't get done.
That's right.
He did absolutely nothing but move on and keep doing what he was going to do. That's the best thing you can do. I've laughed before. I tell you the best illustration. I've told this all over the world, and it's helped so many pastors. I said, you're driving to Disneyland on the way out of your street. A bunch of chihuahuas start barking at your car. And one person gets out of the car and says, why are you barking at me? I'm going to Disneyland, and you're barking at me. And you dogs, there's no reason. I'm doing the right thing. I haven't done anything wrong. I'm going to talk to your owners because you should. You know what you do? You keep driving to Disneyland. And let the chihuahuas bark. Okay? That's what you do. Or you run them over. But you just keep on driving. You don't stop.
That's right.
You know the funny thing about critics generally? Is they're going to criticize whether you try to straighten it out and bring the truth out and explain it and explain why you're right. They're going to still do it anyway.
Right.
Now you just get rolled up with them and go to their level and become one of them.
Absolutely.
That's all that happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change them at all. It just makes you stop doing what you should do.
Yeah.
So you just, oh, that's nice. Good. Anyway, I got something to do here. It doesn't do any good. He went, the first thing he did, he handled the battle properly. He went and did his thing. He just kept on building something. Kept on doing the right thing. When the walls get built, the critics will be put in their place. And so you just keep on doing your thing. He handled the battle properly. Underneath he handled the battle properly, first of all, he kept on doing his thing. Next, he did not let criticism stop him. He did not let criticism stop him. Chapter 2 and verse 19. It says, then when Sanballat the Hornite and Tobiah his servant the Ammonite and Geshem the Arabian heard it, they laughed us to scorn. And just understand, that phrase, it's used in the Old and New Testament. Laughing to scorn means they laugh you and mock you until you're humiliated. That's what it means. It means like, it's not just they laugh you walk by. It means they just laugh and mock you until you're just sitting there going, and everybody else is kind of laughing. It's when you're humiliated completely. By the way, you know they did that to Jesus? They laughed him to scorn when he said, no, she's not really dead. She's alive. She's going to live in a sec. They laughed him to scorn. And they laughed them to scorn and despised us and said, what is this thing that you will do? Will you rebel against the king? Then I answered them and said unto them, the God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore we as servants will arise and build. But ye have no portion, no right, no memorial in Jerusalem. He doesn't let criticism stop him. Chapter 4 and verse 1 and through 3, it says, but it came to pass when Sanballat heard that we builded the wall, he was wroth, and took great indignation, and mocked the Jews, and spake before his brethren and the army of Samaria, and said, what do these feeble Jews? Will they fortify themselves? Will they sacrifice? Will they make an end of it in the day? Will they revive the stones out of heaps of the rubbish which are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite, which is by him, and he said, even that which they build, though a fox grow up, he shall even break down their stone wall. And he says, then we praise, hear us, O Lord, for we are despised. What were they doing? While they were getting mocked, they were building the wall. And look, you're going to get criticized. If you start doing out of the status quo and doing something great, you're going to be criticized. And that's, what do? You just keep on building. Keep on building. And some of the points were real. They said, hey, what are you going to build out of this rubble? It's a trash heap. You're getting your stones out of broken rubble. So it's that big rocks. They kept on building. There's more mortar. And keep on building. And they did that. They were slandered, chapter 6 and verse 5. Then sent Sanballat his servant unto men in like manner the fifth time, in an open letter in his hand, whereby is written, it is reported among the heathen, and Gashma say that thou and the Jews think to rebel, for which cause thou buildest the wall, that thou mayest be their king, according to these words. Okay, you know what they're saying? They're saying Nehemiah, and they're trying to slander. They're slandering Nehemiah, saying he's doing this so he can become their king, and rebel against that. And of course, it wasn't true. And in verse 7 and 8, and then he says, look, it's not true. It isn't true. And they're slandering him. He was slandered, but he did not let the criticism stop him. Next, they kept working when threatened. Chapter 4 and verse 7. They kept working when threatened. And it says, but it came to pass when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabians and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites heard that the walls of Jerusalem were made up, and the breaches began to be stopped, they were very wroth, and conspired all of them together to come and fight against Jerusalem, and to hinder it. Nevertheless, we made our prayer unto our God, and set a watch by them day and night because of them. And verse 10 continues on the work. So they were threatened. And all the enemies and all the oppressors came and said, we're going to kill them. We're going to have to attack them because their wall is going to get built. We can't get in. Let's do it before they finish. They started praying, Lord, protect us. And they set guards out there. And they kept working. And they kept working. And they kept working. It's interesting if you look at verse 16. It says, and it came to pass from that time forth that half of my servants wrought in the work, and the other half of them held those spears, the shields, and the bows, and the habergeons, and the rulers were behind the house of Judah. So now you got workers, now you have guards there who are keeping the workers going while they're going along and continuing along, and they're doing that, and they keep on going, and they're working. And they have, verse 17, they which build the wall, and they which bear burdens, and those which laid it, every one of them, one of his hands wrought in the work, and the other hand held a weapon. So on one hand, he's laying a brick, and in the other hand, he has a sword. So they say, man, they're going to attack us any second. But we got to keep building. Even though we got to get ready every second. So they're putting rocks in there, and they're troweling, and they're putting things together. And on the other hand, they have a sword or a spear. Why? Even when they're about to get under attack, they're still building. They're still building. They're still building. They fight for those they love. Brothers and sisters, if you don't have family, he said the brethren, the church people here, they need you. I think Brother Samuel over here, he's got a church, and his people need him. He's got a wife, and she needs him. But he's got a heart for the whole Caribbean. And you know they're building a building, and it's a big project in St. Lucia. You know, he's not building that building for him. Sure, he's not building that building just for his church. What's that building for? What else is it for? For a Bible college. So people in the Caribbean have Bible college. For conferences for the pastors in the Caribbean who are all scattered to come to one place. For all kinds of things. So they got to build that building. Because it's bigger than just, I need an office. Because if it's just, I need an office, well, you probably stop building out there a while when it gets discouraged and the battles come. You got to keep building. And you fight for those you love. Next, they prepared what they could. They prepared what they could. Again, in verse 16, it came to pass that from that time forth, that the half of the servants wrought in their work, and the other half of them held both the spears and the shields and the bows and the habergeons, and the rulers were behind the house of Judah. They kept building what they could. They prepared what they could. They did their best. verse 19, and I said to the nobles and the rulers and the rest of the people, the work is great and large, and we are separated upon one wall, one from the other. In what place, therefore, you hear the sound of the trumpet, resort thither unto us, and our God shall fight for us. They made plans. They said, look, when you hear the trumpet, come here, you guys watch. And they did the preparations they could. Remember, it was all God dependent, but they did what they could do. People who say this all dependent upon God and I don't have to do anything don't understand. You have to do your part for God to bless it and do your best. And they did what they could. Next, they fought for those who they loved. They did not get sidetracked. Chapter 2. So what happens? Finally, the enemy said, look, they're not going to stop building the walls. It's Nehemiah. Nehemiah is the key to this. He keeps driving them and keeps saying, keep on building. We got to get Nehemiah. And so he said, hey, Nehemiah, they sent a letter to Nehemiah and said, Nehemiah, we want to meet with you for a while. Let's just talk this over. Let's make some peace. And let's just get together and let's just figure this out so we can all have peace and good fighting and do all those things. And they sent him a letter that said that. In chapter 6 and verse 2, then Sanballat and Geshem sent unto me, saying, come, let us meet together in some one of the villages in the plain of Ono. But they thought to do me mischief. Never meet somebody in a place called Ono. And that's what it's called. And they want to meet in the plain of Ono. And he said, no. But look what he said in verse 3. It says, and I sent messengers unto them, saying, I am doing a great work, so that I cannot come down. Why should the work cease while I leave it and come down to you? You didn't get sidetracked. Nope. Sorry. We're too busy building. I don't have time to meet with you guys. You've already shown who you are. You've already shown. You've been fighting us and mocking us and criticizing us. You're not the kind of person I want to meet with. We'll just keep building the walls. And in verse 4, yet they send unto me 4 times after this sort. I could mention the same manner. I got a great work. I cannot come down. I cannot come down. I've got to keep doing this great work. Then get sidetracked. Next, they were courageous. These are all underneath. They handled the battle properly. They were courageous. Chapter 6 and verse 11. And I said, should such a man as I flee? They were threatened to kill Nehemiah. And they said, go hide in the temple. And he says, no, it's not proper. You know, I'm not going to run. If I start running, everybody's going to start running. So I'm not going to flee. God will protect us. And then what did he do? He said, I'm relying on God. Should a man such as I flee? and they just kept on going. He was courageous. They were courageous. Next. So after this point, to handle the battle properly, next point is, there are always complications and troubles unforeseen. Here's the thing I don't like. I am simple. If you said dig a 100-foot long trench, wouldn't bother me at all. Simple things don't bother me. Complicated things bother me. I mean, you can give me anything in the world if it's just simple, but you can give me a little tiny thing that's very complicated, and I go, ugh. Complicated. I hate complicated. I like simple things. And you know what? With humans, they find ways to complicate things. They mess things up pretty bad. And all of a sudden, they're trying to get food for everybody. They find out that it's too long. I don't have near time to tell you the whole story, but the nobles of the Jews had been charging interest, which is forbidden in the Bible, against the Jews, and charging such a high rate to the poorer people that the poorer people had to start mortgaging their homes to them, and then they started mortgaging themselves and their kids and everything else. And when they were trying to get food and trying to get stuff, the nobles owned everything and were oppressing the poor Jewish people, which is all for every part of that's forbidden in the law. And the poor people were saying, look, we can't even get food because the noble Jewish people, they own everything. They have all the food storehouses. They have everything. We're not getting enough food to work and to do these things. We can't feed our families. And it's a big, complicated mess. In verse 6, and chapter 5, verse 6, and I was very angry when I heard their cry in these words. And I consulted myself and I rebuked the nobles. Verse 9, and I said, it is not good that ye do aught ye do. Ought ye not to fear our God because they reproach the heathen and the enemies? And so he had to deal with complications and problems. Look, it's always like that. You have this to do and understand life gets complicated. And you just wish it was a clear path to get this thing done. It's never a clear path. There's always something to sidetrack. Always some problem and fire you have to put out somewhere. It's just part of life. But those complications and problems, he just ended up solving the problem, dealing with it, and getting it back to work. Next, they finished. They finished. Amen?
Amen.
Chapter 6 and verse 15. So the wall was finished in the 25th day of the month, Elul, in 52 days. 52 days it took. They kept building. And they built the walls, they built the gates, and they got it all done. They got the walls up first, and there was no gates. It didn't do any good to have walls and no gates. And they got the gates in, and they built them. Why? Focus.
Amen.
I'm doing this for God. This is an important work. And not letting things sidetrack. Not letting people and criticism and battles and complications and all those things. And just keep building. When you have to do it with one hand, you keep building with one hand. And there's times in your life where you can't do it as fast, but you don't stop. Just keep plowing. And they built the wall. And so the title today is Enemies of Building. Enemies of Building. You know who you know who the decision was? You know who was dependent upon whether it got built or not? I know God, but you know who it was? It wasn't the way we think of it is. It wasn't whether Sanballat and Tobiah would stop him. It was a matter of whether Nehemiah would stop him. That's a big different way to look at it. It's not a matter whether you have hard circumstances. You have hard circumstances. It's a matter of whether you're going to stop. Because you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And you've got a great God. If you're God dependent, you can do anything that needs done. Just a matter of whether you'll get sidetracked and discouraged. Any of those things. Sidetracked, discouraged, angry, whatever you do. Whatever the sidetrack is, lowering down to their level, coming down to where they are, whatever you do, that's why you get messed up. That's why you don't build a wall. But they finished the wall. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Let's go ahead and pray and thank God for this. Father, thank you for the example of Nehemiah. He returned and eventually they rested. After 52 days of work, they had walls and gates and Jerusalem was secure because someone kept on fighting. And someone loved other people enough to keep on battling for them. And we're courageous. May we have that in our lives. May we live that in our lives. May we in our lives not get sidetracked, not be stopped by critics, not get too consumed with our own lives to realize there's some people who need us. Thank you for your word, and I pray that we live this and do this and have higher causes that need you and need us to stay focused on. Maybe build great things and great lives. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.